Autism has been misunderstood for decades. As awareness grows, it's increasingly being distorted by politicized and misleading narratives. And that noise is drowning out what matters. The question must be asked: are we really looking at autism with the whole person in mind? Or are we just recycling the same conversations? In this episode, I'm joined by Kenneth Mims, a scientist turned educator turned autism advocate, to explore that question. He brings both lived experience and systems-level thinking to this work. Kenneth leads the Neurodiversity Education Research Center, or NERC, and founded Science Prep Academy, NERC's flagship STEM private school designed to support neurodivergent learners as they transition into college and the workforce. His work centers on preparing autistic students not just academically, but for life beyond the classroom through social emotional learning, mental health support, and pathways into college, career, and purpose. This episode isn't about labels. It's about what happens when we try to understand autism in pieces instead of as a whole, when learning is separated from mental health, when behavior is separated from humanity, and how that kind of siloed thinking can be deeply detrimental. How we talk about autism shapes the support people receive, and sometimes whether they receive support at all. This episode asks what becomes possible when we start supporting the whole person. This week on The Joy of Neurodiversity. Hey, it's Joy, and this is the Joy of Neurodiversity podcast. Here we break down stereotypes, celebrate the brilliance of different minds, and get real about what it actually means to be neurodivergent. Because at the heart of it all, neurodiversity isn't just a concept, it's people. It's lived experiences, challenges, strengths, and the stories that connect us. Whether you're here to learn, feel seen, or reimagine what's possible, you're in the right place. By pressing play, you're choosing to embrace a new way of thinking, one that honors every brain for what it brings. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Joy of Neurodiversity. I am so happy that you're here. Today, our guest brings both lived experience and professional insight to this conversation. Kenneth, I am so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for just what you do and the impact that you're having.
Oh, no, I should say the same to you. And I think that as people listen to the conversation and see everything that you're doing, I think everyone's going to be inspired. So I'm really excited to have you on. It's been a long time coming. I was talking to my friend Misty today, telling her, like, I'm having this guest on. He's great, but we went to Hampton at the same time, didn't know each other. So
Yeah,
it's
that's how the universe
it's
works.
how the universe works. Absolutely. So I wanted to just jump right in and start at the heart of what you do. And so, in your opinion, what happens when autism is treated as a learning difference, but the mental health piece is ignored?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so there's a challenge, many times for parents who have kids who are autistic or individuals, because you have this educational model that creates a diagnosis. It's not technically a diagnosis; it's just a determination, I guess, evaluation. But it's the same process. But in the medical world, it's an evaluation and then a diagnosis and then medical treatment. But it's two different worlds. And so with autism, I found something called, I call it the slippery slope.
Mm.
And so in education, unfortunately, there's no services in the school model and education. There's no support for mental health at this time. They can refer out to outside sources, but it's something called slippery slope. So autism is a social emotional developmental delay, and so when you have a delay in development of awareness and skills, it creates a gap. It creates social challenges, and so it creates isolation. And so the slippery slope starts with isolation. And when you become isolated, and that can include, the aspects of masking, putting on a mask, which you can, integrate into society or work school,
Yeah.
but you're really not connected. You're still isolated. You're disconnected. And so
Mm.
then that transitions and actually to depression. And so
Yes.
then there's a depression piece that comes along after the isolation, and then after that, there's the aspect of, unfortunately, suicidal ideation and thoughts and behaviors and
Yeah.
actions, rather. And so that's something that the school systems and just, I think, general society, parents just are not aware of. And that's something that I really have tried my best to have that difficult conversation through love and empathy. But it's
Mm.
a challenging conversation, but it impacts a great amount of individuals who are neurodivergent, to have the capacity, the ability to transition into the workforce, transition to college, transition into school systems, be it special ed or percentage of general ed or a combination. So,
Yeah.
but it's a critical piece, and I find that individuals that do receive the mental health support when they're in college or somewhere in that transitional piece, because
Mm.
we talk about early age milestones, but no one talks about young adult milestones. And the transition into young adulthood is actually the most challenging for individuals who are neurodivergent, because the social and emotional, weight, transition, change, shift, dynamics is unbelievable for everybody. And so, yeah, that's a great question.
No, it's so much of what you said, and thinking about the things that we put in place for younger students for their social emotional development and what have you. It's true when we look at later on our older students transitioning to uni in university, transitioning into the workforce. And you're right, we don't necessarily have supports in place for them. And as you said, with neurodivergence, I think that whole transition, or I guess depression being an issue, I think it also can happen so quickly because of the social emotional piece. As I'm thinking about the term slippery slope, and even if I'm going to just think for myself, in the way that my brain works, the way that I know so many neurodivergent brains work, is things that come up for us that might be everyday occurrences for other people, I tend to spiral very quickly if it's something that's upsetting me. And I mean, and I think, I don't know, you can speak to if you have experiences with this as well, but I'm really good in a crisis. Like, if there's a crisis, I'm the person that you want around you. But let my GPS stop working, or my TV is not connecting the way that I want to, or as you were joining today, we'll tell the listeners behind the scene, we're having difficulties with your camera connecting. And in my mind, I'm like, oh God, if that was me, I would spiral so quickly because of that. It doesn't look like you have, but can you talk just a little bit more about slippery slope in relation to the mental health piece as well? I think that would be really valuable.
Yeah, it's funny. So behind the scenes, just trying to connect to a podcast or a Zoom call, you can have a meltdown, or it could be a trigger.
Yeah.
Why? And again, why? Socially, excuse me, and emotionally. Like your social relationships. Oh, this is my boss, or this is a peer that I respect, or this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and then emotionally, how what does that mean? How do you process that? So behind the scenes, I did have to use mindfulness. I had to breathe. I have different strategies that I learned over the
Yeah.
years. But the reason why I say like a slippery slope is just the way that the mind works. Like I catch myself nowadays, TikTok or, Facebook, and you just scrolling. Oh, I'm just gonna, take a 1 minute break.
Yes.
And then you scroll and scroll, and it's like an hour goes by, and you're like, what in the world? But it's the mind is like a creature of habit. And
Yeah.
so we have these habits, so we talk about isolation becomes a habit.
Mm.
Like, so the neuroplasticity and how the mind works, and how, and addictions. It's really, you
Yes.
become addicted to certain behaviors, you know, and so what you become is maladaptive behaviors or maladaptive habits. And so
Mm.
that's where with our students, we found that, excuse me, students that I've taught over the years, like they're geniuses. Many of them are brilliant, but they have maladaptive social behaviors that are just habits that they just can't break. And destroy relationships. That's why many people, who are neurodivergent struggle in intimate relationships. They just have maladaptive, like, hey, you're not talking to me. Hey, you're not. Well, it was just, I had I'm tired, or I had a tough day and I don't
Yeah.
know how to communicate that, or I just need time to decompress, blah, blah, so much. But it just creates, excuse me, isolation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the reason why I call it slippery slope is because it's once you start moving this and accumulating those behaviors, they build up, they crystallize. I call it they crystallize and they build up energy. They build up like magnitude, like from a quantum physics standpoint, they build up a magnitude, and it's challenging to move in the opposite direction after a long period of time or a certain period of time takes place, because you have to overcome that inertia in that direction. And so it becomes slippery because, so you start to slip and then you just start to slide. And like you said, you spiral. And so it's isolation. And then you're depressed. And then
Yes.
you're depressed because you're isolated, or you're depressed because of your habits. You're depressed because you don't have the awareness and skills, the emotional, intelligence, how do I get out of this? And unfortunately, there's no systems in middle school, high school, workforce, that's, support individuals to move in that opposite direction. There's no, really infrastructure. And so if you look at individuals who have like physical disabilities, if they have a wheelchair, society has built systems like a ramp to get it to provide access.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately in our society, we don't have infrastructure that provides access and that provides support so individuals who are neurodivergent can adapt to society, to life. So,
and I just on the mere fact that you're a physicist.
correct.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, physics. So just the mere fact that you're just like talking about quantum physics and how that relates to neurodivergence, and it makes complete sense. So I'm loving that we're gonna get to look at that piece. And I think that just your background and then what you stepped into with the work that you're doing, I just think that it's so interesting to see how those two worlds have kind of crashed together. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But before we get into the work that you're doing, when people meet you, what part of your story do they not usually see?
I think, well, my personal story, because I don't really share my personal story, and I haven't shared it at all, until more recent years. So my story on a personal level is that this journey, as far as being an educator for students who are autistic, opened up, a new reality for me, actually a healing journey, because by me teaching a student, I realized that I was, also autistic or neurodivergent myself. But, that was just the beginning, because once I really, my passion and compassion for students, I wanted to figure this out. I wanted to protect them. I wanted to allow them to reach their full potential. And my thing as a scientist was I wanted them to be able to transition to the STEM workforce, because I saw my peers in the physics community, researchers and graduate students and professors, they were neurodivergent. And so I said, oh, wow, these are just, I love science. This particular student population loves science. So it was a common love. But I've realized that the solutions, the strategies, the therapies that benefited the students that I taught and that I created learning environments and experiences for directly benefited me. And so basically I was healing myself while I was, helping my students. And it allowed me to grow as an individual, but also allowed me to grow, as a husband, as a son, as a brother, and understand that, individuals in my family, also was impacted. And so certain things that I experienced as a childhood, I was able to, move in the direction of healing,
Mm.
and so yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, but I think what you said, it really resonates with me and rings true in my life as well. As an educator, there was a lot of healing that came when I started working with my students, or some of like the hangups that I had for growing up dyslexic and really struggling. And then now later on in life, learning that I have ADHD. So like it's working with students has been really healing. But if I could just ask you to take us back a little bit to what school in early life was like for you. We'll talk more about your autism journey in just a bit, because I think it's really interesting. But when people think of someone who is autistic, and I know that it's not the reality, and that's why I love that you're on, and I just love to be able to show different examples of what neurodivergence looks like. And yours is just another amazing example. But when I think people think about autism, I don't think that they think of someone that's autistic being a physicist or, and for me, coming from a place of struggle, moving from middle school to high school and into uni, I don't, yeah, I'd love to know what your journey was, and was school difficult for
No,
you? Like, what did that look like?
listen, I think that's the craziest thing, that like we can't in society we don't see that physicists are autistic, that nerds
Mhm.
are autistic. We can't see that Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Wozniak, Elon Musk, Kanye West,
Mhm.
and a host of others, Albert Einstein,
Mhm.
Newton, it's on. We can't see it. We don't see it.
Yeah.
We don't see that nerds are socially and emotionally developmentally delayed. The
Mm.
issue is this. Fundamentally, the issue is this: that society doesn't equate autism to an intellectual disability,
Yes.
and it has nothing to do with IQ. In fact, there's a host of individuals that are neurodivergent that are autistic that have above average IQs.
Mhm.
And that's why, like, we have kids that are nonverbal that are geniuses. They're
Yes.
non-autistic, nonverbal, but you get them the right supports and devices and technology. Man, we're finding out that they have ability understanding other languages,
Yeah.
and they can't, and they're nonverbal. But on, but not to get off track. But from a physics standpoint, as
Mhm.
an early age, I was I was a nerd. I was a scientist. My
Okay.
mom supported, put me in camps, space camps, science camps. And then so I just always remember like a saying, that people don't say anymore, but years ago people say, "Oh, it's not rocket science. It's not
Yeah.
rocket science." Right? But I was like, I looked at it like, well, I'm a scientist. I am a rocket scientist. But it was more of the rigidness, the social emotional lack of understanding awareness is what people say when it's not rocket. It's like you're missing the point, or you're missing some social cues. You're missing the social aspect. So looking back at it at an early age, yeah, I remember one of my yearbooks in like kindergarten or something like that, or first grade at elementary school. And the kid would just wrote like, "Yeah, you're weird" or something like that,
Oh.
and I erased it out. And I'm like, like kids, but yeah, weird. That's what we're in the revolution, the age of weirdness.
Yeah.
Seriously, like look at what's
Yeah.
going on. Everybody's weird, colored hair, this, that, everybody got this. So the science was like a place of refuge for me. It allowed me
Mm.
to allow my mind to not be boxed in.
Okay.
So when I study physics, I could go to the end of the universe, and understand. So this is where individuals who are neurodivergent, autistic, many, they find, a haven within like logical reasoning,
Mm.
and they struggle with the understandings of like social, emotional. So yeah, at an early age, I really just got down with the science,
Mm.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily the greatest at it because social emotionally, my mom was telling me a story the other day that when I was in elementary school or kindergarten, I was doing the math work and I had all the math done. And I didn't, and the teacher said, but Ken doesn't want to color the pictures after the math problems. And my mom was just saying, like, I had a social emotional issue with why am I coloring these pictures? And this is math work.
Yeah.
And so
Listen, and I'm sorry, that makes sense.
why am I coloring the apples? Like, I
I
don't,
already figured out what the solution was. Why do I need to color them?
but so looking back at it, and we find it, and that's like, you know, so that's my, yeah. So, and then when I went to college, I changed my major a couple of times, but then I found physics, and I was able to do research, and I was able to connect with people. So I connect with people on information, facts, that type of stuff, systems, logic, solutions. I'm a problem solver. So, like you
Mm,
said, when there's like pressure, like I can solve problems because I kind of filter out social, emotional,
yeah.
factors.
But there was never you didn't struggle. Like grades were not an issue. It was more so the social emotional side, but the academic side was fine.
um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
academic refinements, yeah, it was not a problem, and you find that with certain population of autistic students, it's not an issue at all.
Mm,
The academics, it's just that social emotional piece. That's where individuals who are autistic can go through education, but then when they transition to workforce or even transition to college, they can only last maybe 60 days. And
yeah.
then they're at home, curled up in the bed, and not able to leave because they had some
Mm.
what's called stickiness, so they haven't been developed socially and emotionally, and then or you go to the job site and then individuals just transition from job to job to job because they have these triggers and these barriers and those type of things.
So interesting. So I guess let's transition a bit into professional life. So we know that you were uh, identified as having autism, but that, and as you said, that came through when you were working with your students, and it led you to look at the way that your mind works. And so I know that can you just walk us through what that looked like? Because your diagnosis, I hate to use the word diagnosis, you're identifying your autism, was really closely linked to your career and your students. So I'd love for you, because I honestly think that I'm hearing this story more and more with
Yeah,
neurodivergence. Like I didn't know, figured out that I had ADHD because I was listening to a podcast, and I have other friends who learned that they had forms of neurodivergence when their own children were being assessed for different difficulties that they were having. And so, just I'd love for you to talk about that.
yeah. It's interesting. So nowadays we have a generation of parents who learn that they're neurodivergent, autistic, based upon their child or their children receiving the diagnosis. And it's
Mm,
just a wave across the world. Oh
yeah.
wow, like I have the same characteristics, and so that was similar for me, but from a student standpoint. So I had a student. I was teaching it in my first year, teaching an inclusion physical science class at eighth grade middle school,
Okay.
and I was at the same time I was working on a master's degree to get certified to teach every science subject, every grade level. And I started doing all my research on this particular topic of autism because I had a student who asked a very high level question.
Mm,
He didn't understand the social norms of the eighth grade middle school classroom. He had an extra teacher, a paraprofessional, and then I noticed he sat by himself at lunch. But he
okay.
asked this high level question that impressed me,
Mm,
and it stood out from all the other students. And I'm like, man, who is this guy? So I went and talked to the special ed coordinator, found out his diagnosis was autism. Never heard that term in my life.
mm,
So I was working on, classes like psychology or learner because my classical background was physics, and
yeah.
so teaching wasn't my background. I had to learn how to teach through being in the field to some degree, and
Mm,
then I went back and got the theoretical knowledge, and um, so I was introduced to autism from a strength-based perspective compared to a deficit-based perspective. So that's really
yes.
has been my, you know, that's what makes me different because I saw that this child was like a genius, and I saw the
Mm,
potential, and I saw the strengths. Typically, when people are introduced to autism, be it as an individual getting diagnosed or a parent who has a child,
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's a challenging journey.
Mm.
And then the crown of the challenging journey is the title, the disability title of autism. So it's typically bad grades, behaviors, something going on horrible.
Yeah.
Then there's assessments and blah blah blah. But so for me, I started doing all my research on autism, and so I discovered that the characteristics of autism reminded me of myself. So the
Mm.
characteristics like analytical, problem solving, thinking outside the box, thinking on things for a long period of time, like hyper focusing, and those
Mm.
type of things. Like if you look at like scientists, like George Washington Carver, he studied the peanut. I mean, think about it. He studied the peanut his whole life.
That's true.
Or you look at like Einstein, who studied like light. I'm study light. I'm just study light. I'm just look at light my whole life. Like, like come on now.
Oh,
Like
you're
that's
so right. And like Thomas Edison and
I'm
oh
studying.
my God.
I just spent my whole life just looking at this one aspect, and
Looking at
I'm
a
going to
peanut.
see.
Oh my, you're so right.
But that peanut and all those things are hugely impactful. And
Yeah.
so that's the positive side. And some of the challenges are the social emotional pieces. So, now, it's a lower emotional intelligence. So the awareness, not picking up on social cues, not understanding what they call theory of mind, just understanding other people's perspectives and emotions, those type of things. Then there's
Mm.
the sensory piece. Then there's the sensory piece includes light, sound, taste, touch, smell, overstimulation, lack of self-regulation, anxiety, masking, all those, other challenges that come along with it.
Yeah.
So I was able
And
just
not
to,
just autism, because many of the things that you just mentioned are things that I struggle with as a dyslexic and as having ADHD. Like so many parallels. If we were to sit there and like, I feel like maybe I should make one. If we sit there and look at what are some of the different, I won't say challenges, but things that we face as neurodivergents, maybe if I put them into a Venn diagram, like there would be so many overlaps between each of the different types of neurodivergence. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it's an umbrella, and is science still yet to really, finalize any, like understanding in this particular space. It's brand new. So the word
Hmm.
neurodiversity hasn't been codified in any law, legislation, that I'm aware of on a federal level, state level, or local level. So in
Yeah.
school systems, we don't use the word neurodiversity at all. And so there's just a lack of science within society to provide understanding at
Yeah,
all.
like in our policies and things. Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, I know that the term was coined in 1990, but I mean, even as someone who is neurodivergent, I didn't start using that term regularly. I mean, it's definitely been within the last 10 years and probably 5 if I'm going to be, like really think about how much I used it. And I the percentage of people that don't even know what neurodiversity is and don't understand that they fall on the spectrum of neurodiversity and that neurotypicality versus neurodiversity are on that same spectrum. Just getting people to understand that is another challenge all in itself, but I digress. If you were to look at the influence that your scientific mind has had on the way that you approach autism, how has it impacted? Because I really feel like you look at it from a lens that is not like one that I've seen anyone else that I've spoken to look at it, but then it makes complete sense the way that you approach it. So how has it impacted?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it,
Mm.
it, it took me, a long time to understand, like I said, that strength-based perspective.
Yeah.
So I had the confidence. I had the confidence in myself. I didn't look at myself as deficient or disabled.
Mhm.
I'm a scientist. I'm a physicist. So it's
Yeah.
all, like I know I'm smart. I'm that's not a question. And so that gave me the privilege to do something, on my own. So 2017, I started a nonprofit in a school, for kids who are autistic, a STEM
Mm.
school. I did this before the perception that individuals who are neurodivergent and autistic had the capacity to to be anything, to transition to the workforce, to transition to college. And I just saw something. I saw myself. I saw my story. Hey, it makes sense. Why not create an environment? I just did it because I love science. I love physics so much. I wanted to create a STEM school. And this population I found liked it. And so why not? Why not do it? And it worked out. And so, almost 10 years later, STEM is just a hook. So it's just a way to engage, kids and families. And so, that strength-based perspective. But also, I just think me as an individual, in high school, I was an athlete, so I have this kind of like this athlete coach mentality. Also, I think as a male, as African American male, I provide a degree of confidence, but not just confidence, but so within the space, unfortunately, there's a higher population of males students who are autistic, a greater number, and so that's a lot of male energy. And so what I found that I've been able to, bring a perspective that's able to support, that. See, so when we talk about, again, autism, it's a social emotional developmental delay. So you have a developmental delay of developing boys into men.
Yeah.
And just as much as, girls into women, but there's a higher population, again, of boys, of males in this for whatever reason. It could be different reasons.
I think that the thing that gets me about that is that, yes, there are a higher population of boys that are diagnosed, but it's only because that's who the assessments are geared towards. And it's when we look at, especially with social emotional intelligence and the way that our minds develop, girls just develop that skill a little bit earlier, like sooner than boys, and we learn how to mask a lot sooner than boys. And so I think to an extent boys have an advantage in that way, because it becomes much more apparent that they're struggling socially and emotionally, because it's just the way that your brains are made up. And girls are much more capable of masking and hiding what it is. But as you were talking, I just wrote down, like, I wish I had that. It's just the comment that I had was, so when you said, you came from a strength-based approach, and you always looked at it as like it wasn't a deficit, and you knew with certainty that you were smart, you're a physicist, right? And I wrote down, like, I wish that I had that, because what I have is the opposite. I've always been okay socially. I've always known that I was very hard, like very smart deep down. All of my testing, my neurodivergence wasn't even identified because I tested so well. And I was just told that I was lazy, that I just needed to work harder, right? And so I have kind of had not from my parents, not from my family, but the school systems,
System.
And so I've kind of had the opposite of that, where, like, I think my neurodivergent brain needs proof before I believe it. And so I knew I was smart, but the proof wasn't there. My grades weren't great. I didn't do well on tests. I was always behind in my schoolwork. So I didn't have the proof that I needed to confirm that I was smart. Yeah. So growing up, I've had to always tell myself, even as an adult, I have a genius level IQ. I tested, I have a genius level. I don't think I know I'm smart, but I have to tell myself every single day that I'm smart. And so when you were saying that, I was like, oh, I wish I had that because I don't. And I really had to work towards that. And I don't know. And I guess the second half of the season is very male focused. And so I'm going to see if I see like the other males that I'm talking to that are neurodivergent, if they have that. And I'm going to wonder if it's a female thing versus a male thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that you bring up a very important, issue, critical issue, as far as the lack of identification support, for women, for girls. You're right. You're absolutely right. And so, as a male, I was able to create so if you look at like a, a, a girl in an environment, a neurodivergent or autistic girl, and then she's in an environment of other males who are autistic neurodivergent, it also, because I look at the girls that, the few girls, I would say about 20% at most that are in our school,
Mm.
they struggle. They struggle because the boys are so, I don't want to say dominant. I say more so like they're so out of control socially and emotionally.
Yeah.
That the girls, they benefit from our environment, which is structured. We use a behavioral program, a social emotional positive behavior support program, and so they're able to really, everybody's able to blossom, both boys and girls. But you're absolutely right, and I do notice that they mask. It's interesting. It's just I think it's a need to study that in much
Yeah.
more detail, because I've saw reports now that many women, they're not they're not learning that they're autistic or neurodivergent until till later in 30s and 40s, and it
Yeah.
may be somebody like at their job, and then they communicate and express, hey, and then talk to somebody else, and then it spreads. But that really saddens me. But to hear
Mm.
those type of things, and it's just the reality of where we're at currently within in our learning environments, that we're not doing. It's an injustice. This really
Yeah.
is an injustice. And those are the type of things that I, long term wise, want to fight for, and that's been my approach. Like I fight for the kids. I'm an advocate. Like
Yeah.
I just have it in me. Like so, but that does really bother me, because it's a huge impact, and I see the impact on women, or I just see the potential,
Yeah.
like you're saying, like genius, like so the society, we need to cultivate that. We need to
Mm.
cultivate individuals so they can have an impact to balance out some of the problems in the workforce and society. But we're stifling. It's like flowers, like we're not allowing them to open up their petals, to
Yeah.
to really, you know for us to bear witness to their beauty and their exceptionality. I think the right
Yeah,
word.
absolutely. And it just goes back to what you were speaking about before, is that there's just these preconceived notions that if you are
Yeah,
autistic, you can't be a certain way. If you are
yeah,
ADHD, you can't be a certain way. If you're dyslexic, you can't be a certain way. And then, as we know, in neurodivergence, in most cases, a lot of us have multiple forms of neurodivergence, right? So then you have more of those labels that are stacked on top of you. Like, this person is autistic and has dyslexia. They absolutely can achieve, right? And I know for you, like being diagnosed in your 30s, that is, I don't know. Was it liberating, or did it kind of complicate your understanding of your own mental health and the way that you walk through the world?
Oh, let me think about that. It was a mixed bag of emotions. I know
Yeah.
one of the first things that was healing, because it allowed me to understand why I had certain challenges
Mm.
socially, and even still to this day. Like, so socially, be it work, be it within a marriage,
Mm.
relationships, intimate relationships, why there was a disconnect, why there was certain challenges. So it's a great amount of emotions that come and that can't be regulated.
Were you married before you learned that you were autistic, or after?
I was married before, and then I ended up getting divorced around the
Okay.
time that I learned that I was, uh, yeah, around that time I learned that I was autistic.
Okay.
And so I started putting it after. And so I was able to start to, put together a multitude of it was just a wave of just understanding
Mm.
that piece from, it's just, you just start to understand. You can like look through the rear view mirror and kind of see like why certain things went certain ways, why
Mm.
you weren't able to connect,
Yeah.
anxiety, and even depression, is the
Mm.
reality, is even depression, a definite isolation. But moving forward, excuse me, I was able to investigate the appropriate strategies to grow, the appropriate, so there's a book called Emotional Intelligence, like 2.0, just focusing on emotional awareness, emotional skills, then, self-regulation, different, how do you self-regulate, the mindfulness piece, certain things, just diet, just things that I put into my body, my mind, meditation, exercise, a host of things. So it was healing different things from the past, but then also it was empowering, to move forward. And so I have the confidence now to understand that you just have to move different. You have to be empathetic, I would say, self-empathy, towards yourself, to understand yourself. And so from an emotion, when you look at it like a deficit, you really just it kind of throws you off a little bit. It's depressing, honestly.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from a strength base, like, okay, this is my strength. It's like if you look at like certain animals, and I don't mean any disrespect to look at animals, but if you look at I think I was looking at something like a cheetah, something like that, or a greyhound, like some of the fastest animals, you see what I'm saying, on Earth. They're fast. They can't run. They may not be able to run for long.
Yeah.
Or they got and so if they do, they may hurt themselves. And so you have to understand your strengths, and understand how you need to maintain it. It's kind of like a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, particularly like a Rolls Royce. You have this capacity, right? But you have to maintain it. So I think with neurodiversity and autism, the biggest thing is that you have to learn that you have to maintain yourself. You have to provide a different amount of, mental maintenance and consideration.
I literally just wrote back down just like your strengths versus your limits. I remember I was at a zoo. So what you just said made complete sense to me. I was at a zoo and there was cheetahs and they were just laying and they didn't have a lot of space in like their enclosure. I mean, and I have opinions about zoos, but I mean, in this moment I was talking to one of the zookeepers and I said I was just a little bit shocked about how small the enclosure was for cheetahs, because I would assume that they would need larger spaces because they like to run. And he said it's really a misconception. He's like, they are capable of running. It's the way that they hunt. He's like, but that is extremely stressful on their bodies, and they don't like to do it, and they can't do it for prolonged periods of time. He's like, here, there's no need for them to, because what they are running for is their food, and that's provided to them. So he's like, cheetahs don't like to run. It's something that they have to do. And like their greatest strength is also one of their greatest limitations, because it's very stressful on their body. And, even if I'm thinking of myself, it's today's New Year's Day. We are recording on New Year's Day, and last night obviously was New Year's Eve. I live in Dubai, and it's where people fly from all over the world to come and celebrate New Year's in Dubai. I think there was an additional 1 million people that are in Dubai this week to celebrate. And my friends, I had multiple people had said, do you want to come and celebrate with us? And I just, I know myself now, and I've just been really dysregulated. I've been really stressed out. And I told all my friends, I really appreciate you wanting to invite me out. But no, I actually sat on my couch and I prepared for this podcast. That's what felt good to me, right? Yeah. And I made myself the last 30 minutes of the year, I just allowed myself to just kind of sit and be. And I had a beautiful view of the Burj. I'm at my friend's house. She has her balcony looks at the Burj Khalifa. And that's what I did. And it's you have to understand your limits and your strengths and what you need to do to survive. And I only in the last couple of years have I been able to do that, but I just really see the value in it. And I think there's also so much value in the people around you knowing what it is that you need and being okay with that.
Exactly.
None of my friends challenged it. They were just like, okay, cool. Yeah, do what you need to do. And I think that we'll transition into talking about your family a bit. It seems like you've come from a family and circumstance that you understand how important mental health is, but that some of that might have come after the fact, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But can you tell us a little bit about your brother? I know that there's been a lot that what you do now hinges on some things with your brother and mental health, but please, if you can share what you're comfortable sharing and came out of what you've learned through your brother and his story.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back at it, I think part of the healing process is they call it transmuting. You transmute your pain into fuel
Yes.
for some positive impact. So we take negative challenges, negative situations, and we use it for good. And that's how we heal ourselves, and that's how we overcome some of those major challenges. And so, at an early age, my brother struggled. I saw him struggle with that transition from high school to young adulthood or adulthood. And when he graduated high school, this wasn't. I think he enrolled in college, and just wasn't successful. I think he may have, didn't even complete the first semester.
Was
So,
he older or younger?
he was 5 years older.
Okay.
5 years older, and I saw him struggle in high school socially. It just didn't. He just kept having social challenges and not following rules, behaviors, those type of things. And when he graduated, I'm not sure specifically what happened, college, work. He never really had a job. He couldn't keep a job. So looking at things, excuse me, looking back in time, it's 2020. But when he was maybe about 2021 transitioning, he attempted suicide for the first time. And I remember my mom, I came home and mom was just running back and forth. And after a while, she explained to me what was taking place. And she asked me to take him to the emergency room. And I was maybe 9th, 10th grade, but I had a car because I went to a school that was kind of far away. Okay. So as soon as I was able to have a car, I got a car. And so I took him to the emergency room, and the crazy thing about it is after that, I totally, have no memory of the experience because, it was traumatic. So I don't, our family never talked about it again. My brother didn't receive any type of, services and support, counseling. And we just, as a family, just wasn't there. We just didn't really know. And we find that in many communities, many families, sometimes higher in African American communities, this aspect of not receiving counseling, mental health, just not knowing.
Yeah.
And so we just kept it moving. And my brother struggled. He was able to have a family and kids. And when maybe about 30 years later, more recently, he ended up relocating to Bali, Indonesia, kind of like separating himself to a different lifestyle, away from the hustle and bustle of America, the responsibility.
Yeah.
But even still, as he got older, he struggled. And so he was, looking back at it, he was undiagnosed autistic.
I was going to ask that if he was ever diagnosed as autistic.
No, because once he got to the country, he really didn't have access to quality health care. And so, and also other mental health, I would say other mental health challenges as well, for sure, depression. And so about just a little bit over a year ago, he unfortunately had struggles and committed suicide, unfortunately. And it was challenging. It was challenging because I would say, looking back at it, he was the really one of the foundation of why I started really doing what I've done on this journey, as far as creating schools for myself, but also I learned a lot from him. And so I look at this mission, this work, as different. I look at it as that we're actually saving lives. And I've talked to some of my team members, my staff, that, the reality that what we're doing is actually saving lives of kids who are neurodivergent, autistic, because we see this, we see this consistent struggle. And typically you don't see it until, you individuals leave high school. Yeah. And so, but now in the research, I started just doing the research, doing severe mental health, severe mental illness, SMI, like the data's out, that the first time individuals have an episode or a mental health episode is in their early, 20s. And typically there's like the 3 year to 5 year ramping up period as far as, that slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? That means that you can see students in high school and middle school, that are displaying mental health needs. And so unfortunately school systems are totally out of the loop. And they may see it, but I don't even think we see it as educators, middle school, high school. But we can't do anything about it, let alone,
Yeah.
even identify it.
Well, when
Unfortunately.
it comes out in so many different ways as well. Like I'm in the process of writing a book, and today I was writing about just my transition from middle to high school, and I was masking a lot and
Mm-hmm.
I felt misunderstood, but I think it came across as me having an attitude, me being defiant,
Okay.
and it was, I think, when I look back on it, it was me struggling with my mental health and also with, I don't, yeah, just struggling with like being misunderstood
Mm-hmm.
and being misunderstood on a level that I don't think many people understand. Like, there's so many layers of understanding neurodivergence. And so I think that, yeah, in this case, and I've spoken to so many people who are neurodivergent and they have been diagnosed as having anxiety or being behavior issues, and it's all mental health that's not being addressed. And then our crazy way of dealing with it as neurodivergence. But I guess for me, what do you think, just in, if you look back at either your own personal journey or the journey that your brother took being misunderstood or misdiagnosed, what gaps in mental health support do you think that was missed that contributed to, the challenges that he might have had over time? I was thinking about the fact that you said he moved to Bali, and I can understand the pull of that. Like, I can understand.
Yeah.
It's such kind of like a mindful place and zen. Like, and if you're
Mm-hmm.
struggling, I can see like the pull of being someplace where like that. But what do you think was misunderstood, or what gaps in mental health might have been missed in his case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's complex. It's complex, and there's a huge opportunity for growth and change to society. In the long term, we're talking about systems that have to be
Mhm.
adjusted, reformed through legislation and policy and
Yeah.
advocacy and research, right? So I have discovered something called the social and economic like determinants for the treatment of autism or neurodiversity. But what I
Mm.
mean by that is like if you don't have access to quality education, if you don't have access to quality health care, you're not going to receive high quality treatment. Meaning like if you don't have access at all, you're
Yeah.
never going to get diagnosed. You're never going to get access to therapies. You're not going to get treated.
Yeah.
And so if you're in school systems that are poor, but most school systems overall, are poor in this particular area
Mm.
of addressing, mental health. But maybe some communities they do a better job at it, right? But also, if you don't have access to healthcare, or you have access to poor healthcare, right? You're not going to receive, that diagnosis, that evaluation, and then let alone, treatment. And then from the social, then the cultural pieces as well. And so
Mm.
within your culture, your home, your community, how they view autism, neurodiversity, mental health is a huge factor. So in certain cultures, unfortunately, throughout this planet, we know on the extreme, they may view it as some type of demonic possession.
Yeah.
And so they're hiding kids. When you look at certain communities throughout the world where their structure is just hiding the kids, unfortunately,
Mm. Yeah.
they just keep them in the house, or they keep them hidden to some degree. And things are changing, though. Things are changing in the U.S., where in the last 10 years, kids are going to church now. Our churches are opening up their doors. The churches are embracing autism neurodiversity because the numbers are just so high that if they don't, I think they would be disconnected. But
Mm. Did you know Royal Span from Hampton? She was on my podcast last season, and
mm,
her child is autistic, and she's very active in the church. And the reason why I asked her to come on to the podcast is because she shares a lot of what happens in her life and on social media. And someone from the church like sent her a DM basically saying like, your son has the devil in him. And I was like, what? And if you see her child, he is the most beautiful, loving child. Like, for anyone to say that to her. And so she's been doing a lot of work within her church community and neighboring community churches, just speaking about, this is what my child needs to be able to be successful. And he loves church, he loves to go, and why should he not be able to? And so she's been working in her community to be able to help people better understand neurodivergent
Yeah, but
children so that they can join. Yeah.
that's horrible, because we're not talking about like a remote village outside of Lagos
Yes.
or Dar es Salaam, something like
Mm.
that. We're talking
Yeah.
about, college educated
Dallas,
individuals.
Texas.
That's Dallas, Texas. We're talking
Yes.
about a parent who's college educated, but it was worse in the past. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
just an indication of, some of the remnants of a older way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so that transitions to like why I, recently wrote a book, for mothers who have kids who are autistic, because I hate even talking about that type of stuff, but unfortunately that's the reality.
Yeah.
That's the reality of what parents or mothers
Mm.
are experiencing in society. And so when you look at, like, that's why I say there's systematic things that have to be changed with the social piece, and then
Mm.
the access to doctors, because there's a piece even in certain communities, the aspect of being diagnosed is frowned upon. I don't want my
Yeah.
child diagnosed with autism, be it in the or any type of neurodiversity in the medical or the education system. And
Mm.
so there's a mentality, and I'm not knocking anybody. It's just
No.
something that has to be talked about and worked out. But it's a reality that, individuals, parents are, how can I say, they feel not just like a victim, but more of they're under attack.
Yeah.
Right. So when they deal with school systems,
Mm-hmm.
they feel, defensive. They're under attack. The medical world, they feel under attack,
Yeah.
and so how they navigate, they're not able to leverage. Where
Mm.
certain individuals, certain community members, or certain individuals can leverage the education system and the medical system. They can leverage it, to be empowered to
Yeah.
provide the appropriate services and support to help their
Mm.
child, develop and grow in a safe, positive environment.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I appreciate the approach that you take, because I think that you really do take your scientific head and those insights and in your lived experiences, and you've been able to shape this well-rounded holistic approach that you use. And but I also love that it also looks at behavior and mental health support, and so I think it's like a nice blend of the scientific but also the human side of things. And it's, you mentioned your book, and so I want to, I guess, talk about two questions, kind of putting them together. But how did your insights, both your scientific insights and then also your lived experience, how did it shape the approach that you're taking with your students, with your school, and then also with your nonprofit that we're going to speak about? And then I'd love to talk about your book and some of the other things that you offer.
Yeah. So I have the professional piece that kind of started things off, but then I, realized just the connections, the close connections. And so we talked
Mm.
about, from me having a brother that, that suffered, I would just say suffered. But then also as a son, looking at my mother, having another son. So that's another piece that allowed me to to just have an empathy,
Yeah.
for really mothers. Because for some
Mm.
reason we find, not, mothers take the lead, have taken the lead over the years traditionally with this space when the child is, dealing with autism or neurodiversity, something, it's dealing with schools, dealing with, and this is always. But I found, traditionally, and mothers process things differently,
Yeah.
and they give birth to the children, they give birth to the child,
Mm.
and so just different factors. And so just watch my mom over the years at an early age until as an adult now. And
Yeah.
so that really opened up my eyes to just some of the challenges and considerations, both both positive and negative. Because looking back at, we all can do things different and better, and we all are growing
Yeah.
when we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s. So just watching my mom on her journey, and then watching, excuse me, watching mothers that I've come across, as a professional.
Yeah.
And what led to me really moving forward with this journey, opening up schools and nonprofits, was a mom. I was having a parent teacher conference, and this is when I was working at another school, and I was going through my report and grades and tests, and the mom was just like, "Yeah, Mr. Mims, that's nice and fine, but I took my child to the movie theater." And their child may have been in 10th grade. And so I took my child to the movie theater over a weekend, gave them $20 just to see how they respond, to give it to the salesperson. And my child gave them the $20, and then they just skipped off. And the mom's just like, "I hear what you're saying, but I'm concerned about this, this life outside,
Yeah.
And that was the first time, that I really just had a understanding of a mom's perspective, who has a child who's neurodivergent, autistic, that's, at that point of considering that transition to adulthood.
Yeah.
And I just say, oh, wow, I'm totally, off, alignment, with what's going on in the home and what's going on from a mother's parent perspective or a parent's perspective with a child
Yeah.
who's autistic.
Well, I guess I just wanted to back up a little tiny bit. I think I need to commend you and your family, your mother, for being strong enough to, one, the loss of a sibling, the loss of a child. I can't imagine how difficult that is. And then to have that happen to suicide and to see that there was probably some things that were undiagnosed. I can't imagine how difficult that's been. But I mean, I just want to thank you and your family for being willing to talk about these things and raise awareness about it, because I think it is so healing to hear other people's stories and other people's journeys. And I hate that your family had to go through that and experience that, but I can't help but also notice how many people that you're helping by just being willing to speak about it and be upfront about it, especially in our community, because so often, we don't talk about these things, especially when it comes to mental health, absolutely when it comes to suicide. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And then just looking at the mother piece, it makes complete sense to me. And I was wondering, I was talking to a friend about your book today, and I was just like, I wonder why he focused on mothers. And then she was like, yeah, because they're the one who deal with it. And I was like,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
She got it.
she,
Okay.
she got it straight away. I was like, oh, I
Okay.
wonder why. But so you've done a lot of work through your book, through your speaking, and also through like accessible resources. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And then what gaps were you feeling in making these resources available?
Yeah. So the reason why I decided to create a book is the model that we created. It's a small model. We have I created a micro school model. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're only talking about 20, 30 kids at most, grades 6 through 14.
Mm.
And we're located in Phoenix, Arizona. And so a lot of times when people start schools, be it private schools, but mainly like charter schools, everyone, and just in business, everybody's trying to skill, skill and become a unicorn, I guess, as they call it, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but in education, there's a high percentage of imploding. So I
Yes.
just knew, being in the profession long enough, that I just didn't want to go that route, and I wanted to slowly create, build, validate, and then
Mm.
when the time's right, move forward. And so that means not rushing to create more seats in schools and more school buildings.
Yeah.
But I've still had something that has a great impact, a huge impact. And so just thinking about, well, how can I provide impact? How can I, still reach more? And so instead of starting more schools, my
Mm.
mind started shifting towards just talking to parents, talking to moms. And so this is just part of a series of books that I'm going to write for stakeholders in this space, which started
Yeah.
with parents and then starting with educators, employers, and then, yeah, and those are the three main stakeholders.
Well, please make them for teachers and for employers, because that is such a gap if just understanding. I welcome that. You can come back on the podcast anytime you want and speak about it when you develop those things, because it's so very needed. But can you, just for people who are not familiar with your book, what is it about and what did you write it for specifically?
Yeah. So it's called A Mother's Guide to Autism. And so, fundamentally, we talked about my perspective, which is a strength-based perspective. So the book is, written from that lens. And so it provides inspiration, a positive, perspective, provides hope. It provides, guidance. So my approach is a little bit different. I look at myself as a guide that supports mothers on their journey and on their heroic journey. And so I look at them as heroes, parents in general as heroes. And so my role as a guide is to empower them with the tools, identify the enemies, the challenges, which one of them is that mental health piece, both for the child, but also for the parent, for the mom, which naturally you understand that would struggle, would have challenges from their own mental health, their own emotional self, but also understanding. Because when you're a caregiver, there's something called caring for the caregiver.
Yeah.
And so when you care for others, be it children, parents, you need to take care of yourself. You need to have certain, systems in place to be able to, balance, self-regulate and balance. So the book just goes into those particular details. It goes into details about, research-based strategies, which is, just basic behavior therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, those type of things. It goes into detail about working with school systems.
Yeah.
How how to advocate, how to navigate and understand, how to work with school systems and some of the challenges and barriers. Because there's a delay, with school systems of understanding how to provide that support. And so those are some of the main components of the book, providing parents with tools, mothers with tools, and really just a refresh, a resetting of a perspective that they can. Because what I realize many parents don't understand is the cycle, the journey.
Yeah.
Because typically kids get diagnosed at an early age. And the diagnosis that comes, from doctors and school systems and professional experts is like, it's a deficit perspective.
Yes.
And what it does is that it causes parents to lose, the perspective, the goals that they have for their child.
Yeah.
And so what happens is parents and mothers actually begin to mourn, the loss of the child that they thought that they had.
Yeah.
But the reality of it, though, in this day and time, and I see it, I know it. I have kids, nonverbal to the age of 6, 7, 8. They go on to be anything, a scientist. They go on to college. They go on to start their own jobs. But all you could do is just provide a positive environment, therapies, but if you fall into that space that society has created, we're losing the potential of the kids. We're losing them because no one believes in them. And then so when you have a parent that believes, the parent has to find other people, teachers, doctors, therapists that believe. And so that this is the story that you'll find with mothers across the world, that they believed in their child.
Yes.
And then they were successful. But if they don't have that support system, if they don't have that kind of like mindset, it's a challenge.
Absolutely. And it's, I love when people write books and things of this nature, and then we'll talk about your nonprofit, because so often people just don't know that they don't know and need resources to better understand what are their options or what can they do to support their child. And every mother that I've met of neurodivergent children, they are fiercely looking for solutions. And so I love that you were able to give one that provided a bit of assistance and knowledge for them to be able to better navigate this world. But you also lead, do you call it NERC? NERC, so the Neurodiversity Education Research Center, and it's an independent nonprofit that's focused on improving access to quality education and workforce development for neurodivergent individuals. And I love that because you have like a very multidisciplinary approach. And so, can you talk about the mission of NERC and the challenges that it's designed to address?
Yeah, so it's NERC, Neurodiversity Education Research Center, and our main program is Science Prep Academy, which is the middle school, high school that we talked about. And so the mission is just to help individuals that are neurodivergent to transition successfully into the workforce, into
Mm.
society. And so the foundation of it is really just to document what we're doing at Science Prep Academy and the different philosophies, strategies, and approaches that we use. And the foundation is really around that strength-based perspective. So many organizations are nonprofits, and we talk about autism and neurodiversity. They're not strength-based perspective. Like, so historically, organizations that started last 5, 10, 20 plus years, it was just a deficit-based perspective, looking at autism as a disability, looking at it. And and things have changed. There's a generation of individuals who are neurodivergent, autistic, that are adults now, that are successful, and they have a stronger voice. And so our organization really represents that particular voice of this new society, of this new age, of this new world of neurodiversity, and understanding how the mind works, and how society really should shift. So we represent a shift in society, and our program, Science Prep Academy, represents that shift in education. And so our goal is to document what we're doing from a research standpoint, but use it and leverage it to advocate for policy and legislation, but to have that larger impact. That's a systemic impact. So that's our goal.
And one thing that I loved about hearing about your school is that you have a 13th year that
Correct. Yeah.
prepares. So can you talk to us about that? Because I think it goes back to what you were saying, just that the social emotional piece. I mean, so often autistic students are so gifted academically, but that social emotional piece is not there, and then they are not necessarily prepared for what life is going to be for them. And just like your example before about the movie theater, he had his money, he gave his money, he was going to the movies, he was going to skip away. Like, all things are good, but there were some things that needed to be addressed there. And so tell us a little bit more about what you're doing to either help students that are transitioning from high school into the university setting or into the workforce, because I think it's really important work that you're doing.
Yeah, you said it absolutely the best, as far as there's some things that need to be addressed. So what we discovered with our school grades 6 through 12 is when our students graduated, there were some still things that needed to be addressed for them to be able to successfully transition into adulthood or to the workforce. And so our kids, our students, we saw that mental health piece, and we saw that social emotional piece. And so we had kids that were, going to college, graduating, getting jobs, good jobs, great colleges, but they weren't being successful, and they were still hanging out with us, stopping by. And still, we create a very positive, safe environment. And what we realized is that, first of all, there's no other place for them to really get it in society, to get what they got from our program. And we needed to have some type of systems in place to support them, as well as a budget that we could staff individuals and create a program. So we decided to create a grade 13 through a partnership with a Banner Hospital, largest employer, largest hospital system in Arizona. And so we were able to have space on their hospital. We have our staff, our teachers there implementing our program. Excuse me. And we have a partnership with a program called Project Search. And so this program has been around for 20 plus years. And we were able to bring everybody together to create a full year internship program where our students report to the job site, report to the hospital in the morning for the hour. We have our curriculum that we teach them, we touch base with them, and then they go on to work under a supervisor like anybody else at the job. And so they have 3 10-week rotations And some of the jobs include, customer service, hospitality, environmental services, it's cleaning, disinfecting, culinary, so that, working in the cafeteria, in the different departments, cooking food, preparing food, and other departments throughout the hospital. Hospital is actually a great place for this because there's so many different things, going on. And so we were able to have a great partnership with them and, provide this experience. And so the goal is for them, once they go through the program, they have experience training, they can go on and apply to a position at the hospital. And we have some students that go on and become employed, with this particular hospital. But also we prepare them through other experiences, particularly in the States, there's something called vocational rehabilitation, which is funded by the state. And so we're able to connect those resources and support. So we just needed to be in their lives, for another year. And we actually transitioned to additional year 14 for those students that choose it, just to be in their lives, to make sure that they're successful, to, identify barriers, and then to be, able to still advocate, for them. And so it's been a huge success. It's been wonderful, and it's really a model that, again, another model that we want to share and take across the world, to be able to help other schools, other individuals to use our model.
Absolutely, and I will encourage people who are listening to reach out to find out more about this. And it is something that I guess the educator in me wants to know. So the school is a traditional school curriculum, but then you integrate mental health into the daily lessons, and then also provide those life skills and transition into workforce. So it's not that it's a completely alternate curriculum. You just have put the other aspects in place to make sure that you are addressing the needs of the students holistically, is what I'm hearing you say.
Correct. Yeah. The curriculum is just standards based, college prep curriculum to meet the requirements for graduation. So, that's standard. What we infuse, is just the total environment, so we create a positive environment. We create a safe environment. So for individuals that are autistic, neurodivergent, a lot of times you hear them, the social piece, either being bullied or just having challenges socially and emotionally.
Yeah.
And so we just create a positive environment through a behavior intervention system, PBIS program. And then we actually integrate behavior support therapies within that. And so those therapies and support they receive is just in the general day setting. The traditional educational model is therapy is just a pull out. They go to a private room and they work with somebody one-on-one. So what we created was we created a therapeutic educational model. So our educational environment is therapeutic. Then, first of all, it's a small environment, low numbers. We're talking about in a classroom, 10 students, two staff. It's like a 5-to-1 ratio. And so just we control the learning environment to support the students. And so we use that same model actually in the workforce. So when they transition to the workforce, we're still providing that positive support, positive reinforcement. We focus on two things really, is the self-advocacy piece and the self-regulation. And so we talked about that, being able to advocate boundaries. Hey, I'm feeling this, I'm thinking this, then be able to self-regulate. If I'm feeling this type of way, how do I change that? If I have anxiety, what do I use? Stress ball, fidget, timeout, headphones, water, mindfulness, deep breathing, those type of things that are age appropriate, but also transferable into adulthood.
You also talked to me about something that was so important and something that recently has really been just integral in just my mental health as a whole, but just like understanding, like you said, mindfulness, but also grounding and getting out into the sun and understanding your gut health and all of these things that we don't have time to go into right now. But are these things that you integrate as well into the curriculums for the students to better understand?
Yeah, we, fundamentally, we have what you would say, holistic approach, where we value health, exercising. We have in the States, we have something called Special Olympics. And so our students are participating in basketball, soccer, track and field. So we're taking a holistic approach. We advocate for a healthy lifestyle. We advocate for a positive lifestyle, and that's all across the board, socially, emotionally. And so we create that positive, safe place through our culture, our school culture. And so that's our school culture, and that's what we advocate for, and that's what we're able to do. So we are a private school, a micro school, but a private school. And so we have that ability to establish that culture and to create a community of families that value our principles.
Yes. And you said grade 8 and up, yes? To grade 8 to 13.
No, actually grade 6 through
Grade
14.
6. Grade 6 through 14.
Yeah, so middle school, high school, and then 2 years, 1 year of work. We found that students also need some additional time just to support them after they have a work experience. They still need time to transition, find a job, make sure they keep a job, because getting a job was one thing. Getting a job is one thing, but keeping it, we find for it is is another hurdle.
Well, I will make sure that I drop everything into the show notes about your school, about your nonprofit, books, resources, all of those things. And I would love to be able to continue speaking to you, but we have to wrap things up. So, given everything that you've lived, you've studied, you've built, what do you think we need to get right when it comes to autism and mental health moving forward? If you could put one thing in place to have just the ideal, circumstances or environment for moving forward to dealing with students with, or not students, but just people living with autism, what would that be?
That's a great question. That's $1 billion question. And it's funny with the school over the years, staff and students and parents, they would just always kind of talk about how much they enjoyed and loved the school and the impact. And I never really understood why until later on. And I found that it was love. When our school, we have love. We provide love. And unfortunately, love has been lost in our society in America. I can just speak towards, particularly in the education system. If you look kind of like the reality of what we're dealing with, in the education system with shootings and just all aspect of being unsafe and conflict and just overall politics, blah blah blah. And so for individuals that need social emotional developmental support, the aspect of love is critical. It's critical. It's fundamental. It's foundational. Yes. Right? That when you in a situation where people, and maybe you can't consciously express it, but you feel this feeling, which is love.
Yeah.
It allows you to grow socially and emotionally. We're talking about social and emotional growth.
Yeah.
It requires love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, love of yourself and then love from other people. And, I speak a lot about mattering in the sense of, and I think it goes back to love as well. So mattering, but understanding that, you as a person add value to others just by your presence, but then they also add value back to you from being around. And I think that goes back to love. So absolutely. That wasn't the answer that I thought you were going to give. It really wasn't, but I'm happy that that's the answer that you gave. Kenneth, if people want to find you, to connect with your work or to learn more about your school, your nonprofit, the work that you're doing, your books, where can they find you? We'll also drop these into the show notes, but where can people come looking for you?
Yeah, people can find me at just kennethmims.com. And that's where you'll be able to access the book and access me if you would like to invite me out to speak. Or actually, we built out a course in community as well, and you'll be able to find access to that for parents. And if you like more information about the organization, Science Prep Academy, and the foundation, that could be at neurodiversitycenter.org.
And we'll drop all of that. And I have family in Arizona, so if I can get there, I'd love to come in and
Oh yeah,
visit your school and see what it is that you're doing.
we would
One
love to
last
have you.
thing, I would love to do it. So I'll make sure that I pester you a bit to make that happen. But we try not to let anyone leave the podcast with we try not to let them leave without us asking this question. Twice it's happened that I didn't ask, and I don't know how that is. But today we're going to ask you, what joy has neurodiversity brought into your life?
Ooh, well, yeah. So yeah, we're talking about love and joy. We're talking about joy. Um, but it's unbelievable, watching the kids, grow, watching them reach their potential, watching them shift from kids choose us. They come to us because it's not working out somewhere else because they're having traumatic experiences. There's a lot of traumatic experiences. Kids in America who are autistic, they're getting arrested in schools. They're being traumatized by bullies, by teachers, by this system of, deficit-based perspective. But
Yeah.
watching kids light up and watching that hope, that their eyes light back up and watching them grow, has done so much for me and
Yeah.
provided me with so much joy. It's unbelievable. So the staff, myself and all the staff, within the organization, they all experience the same joy. So it's undescribable. And it's been one of the biggest surprises for me that didn't do it to receive that, didn't know about it, but very thankful, very thankful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm very thankful that you have trusted me with your story and your willingness to come on. This has been a long time coming. We've been trying to connect for a while, but I think that this was the perfect time because there's so much that you've been doing and that now you've been able to share. So thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the work that you're doing, but also thank you for the passion and the intention that you have behind what it is that you do. I think it's something that should be commended. I really hope that people take so much away from this conversation. I have absolutely loved it, and it matters. Is mental health and support and making sure that anyone receives it, but absolutely neurodivergent individual receives it is so important. So thank you so much. We've loved having you, or I've
Thank you.
loved having you on. And yeah, no, I'm really grateful. I know I say this every single time I record this podcast, but I'm just so grateful that people are willing to come on and share their stories with me.
Thank you for putting this together and doing it. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but thank you for building the platform to allow us to have a voice.
Thank you. It's my pleasure and my joy. And for people who are listening, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs it. And we will see you on the next episode of The Joy of Neurodiversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of The Joy of Neurodiversity. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, empowered, and seen. Remember, neurodiversity isn't something to fix, it's something to celebrate. If you loved this episode, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. It truly helps more people find this space of understanding and joy. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. And let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on Instagram at The Joy of Neurodiversity and LinkedIn at Joy Buckner. And share your thoughts using the hashtag The Joy of Neurodiversity. New episodes drop every other Thursday, so be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next dose of neurospicy brilliance, deep dives, and empowering conversations. Until next time, embrace who you are, celebrate how you think, and keep rewriting the narrative because the world needs your brilliance. Think big, be bold, and never dim your neurodivergent spark because we were never meant to fit in.